All right, in this video we're going to work on a project here with this barn image, and what we're doing is we're trying to make the image bigger. So we're going to look at a couple of ways that we can crop this image bigger and some techniques and tools to do that. So there could be any number of reasons why we might want to make this image bigger. One might be because we are adding it to some sort of social media profile, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and we need it to fit those dimensions. The other reason might be because when we look at the composition of this image, we want this barn to be more in a central area where it catches your eye rather than sort of crammed up in the top of the image. So first we'll just look at the aesthetic cropping, and then we'll look at how to crop this to a specific number of pixels. And first I'm going to click here and hit the Alt key and scroll in a little bit so we're zoomed in. And then we're going to go to our crop tool, and you can left click it or press the C key on your keyboard. And when we click the crop tool, we get our new option bar up here, and we get the little crop handles down on the sides and the corners of our image. Now if we wanted to bring this barn down in the image without causing ourselves too much trouble, what we can do is go grab this crop handle and left click it. And you'll notice that when I left click it, it gives us a grid, which is showing us the rule of thirds. And as a general rule, I'll move this up so you can see these intersections where the image is divided into thirds are important areas for visual impact, and people's eyes are drawn to these intersections. And currently we have nothing on those intersections except for these flowers, which is actually nice, but we want to have the barn on this intersection so it draws more interest. And so if we crop this bigger and bring it up like this, we get the barn door and the side of the barn right into that third. The problem is now we have all of this area up above the sky that's just transparent. There's nothing here. And we have a couple of options. One thing that we could do would be to go back, especially where this is a pretty clear sky. It doesn't have a lot of detail in it. It's just a blank color. We could actually go in with a brush and we could paint this back in, and then we'd have to maybe brush over these trees and get rid of them, and then do a little cloning here to kind of match these trees and finish them up into the sky. That would be one way to do it. But the other way is to use Content Aware Fill. And if you go up to the menu bar, it's right here. And if you click on Content Aware, what that's doing is it's saying when we crop this bigger, we're going to analyze the content that is near this edge, and we're going to fill in this gap to the best of our ability, to the best of Photoshop's ability. And a lot of times, especially if you just have a pattern like this or a blank area like this, it'll do a pretty darn good job. And we'll look at a couple of different ways to do this, but we click on that, and then we simply go click the checkbox, which is confirming that we want to do this crop, and we're going to click on it, and then you're going to see the little wheel spinning as it thinks about what it wants to fill in there. It's analyzing our image, and it's basically trying to replicate it as best as possible. So now it's filled in that sky, and we'll zoom in over here a little bit, pressing Alt and scrolling in. Then I'm going to press the space bar and use the move tool, the hand, and take a look. You can see that really all of this sky looks great because it's a really simple solution. Over here, it didn't do quite as well. You can see that this little 3-branch stem here actually came from here, right? It's the exact replica. So it just assumed that that's what we want up there. Obviously it's not. So what we would need to do would be to go in and do a little touch-up, and we'll do that real quick. We're just going to go get the clone stamp, and we'll make it a little bigger using the right square bracket next to the P key. And then we're going to press Alt, if you remember this, and click on an area to clone. And then we're just going to move in and we're going to get rid of that. Oops, my clone stamp tool is way too sharp. So I'm going to go ahead and Control Z to undo all that. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make it very soft. There we go. Let's try that again. We'll select an area right here and then we'll move in. And we're just going to basically stamp out some of that. Maybe cut that a little bit right there. And we'll do a little bit more coming down this way too. And you could get really detailed with that. And you could even like clone a little bit of this or maybe one of these little twigs over here and kind of insert them up here. Or maybe get a brush and smooth over that sky a little bit to make it look better. But if we zoom out a little bit and just take a look at it, that basically just looks like trees over there. And so the content aware fill basically did what we wanted. It cropped our image bigger and just basically pulled this down into the image so it didn't feel like it's so crammed up against the top and kind of makes it more the focal point. Okay, so that's a pretty simple, pretty intuitive way to go about making an image bigger and using the pixels in the image to expand the image. So let me go ahead and close out of that. We're not going to save the changes. And I'm going to open that up again in the original version, and we'll look at another way to go about this. Okay, so in the last one we wanted to expand the sky to bring this more into the center of the image. Let's say that we actually wanted to go the other way and expand the flowers out in the bottom so we can see more of this cool kind of sweeping motion of the flowers. We could do a similar thing where we start with our crop tool. We grab the crop handle, pull it down. We make sure we're on content aware and notice it remembered my settings. That's an important thing to remember in Photoshop. In most situations it will remember your settings, but it is on because it remembered. And then we'll go click the confirm button. See the wheel spinning while it's thinking about basically analyzing these pixels down here to pull in. And then there you go. It pulled basically the same pixels and rearranged them to fit this pattern. And you can see there are a couple of little weird spots where it kind of repeated things there, and there's kind of a little line here. Although if you didn't know it was not supposed to be there, you probably wouldn't know. But you might want to go in with this one and again do a little clone stamping to kind of break it up a little bit. So I'd use the right square bracket and make that bigger, and I would just hit Alt and target that and then bring a little bit of that just like that to break that up a little bit. Maybe do some from right there. I don't actually like that very much. Even just like that is fine just to break it up. Oh, what we need to do is I need to go to current layer. Let's try that. We'll get rid of what I just did. Control Alt Z, there we go. And we'll go grab this again. We're gonna hit we're gonna make this a little smaller, not too much. Go Alt, target some of those flowers and just kind of drop them in about there, just to break that really kind of repeating pattern up. Maybe do one more. Something like that. I'm going to actually undo that again, and I'm going to make a bit of a harder tool. That's the problem I'm having. So we go back in and we go Alt, click to select it, and then we can move it down. It just had too much of a soft edge. There we go. I had a really soft tool, and so it was basically blurring the image. That's something to be aware of. But okay, see, now we basically covered over that little kind of green stripe. And really, the Content Aware did a great job, and it expanded this down and kind of created more of a flow to that, and it looks great, okay? So that's the second way that you can use Content Aware to crop something bigger. Then I'm going to close this out one more time, and I'm going to show you one more crop technique. We'll say no, and then we'll go back to that barn edits image. And now we're going to look at how to crop this image to a specific dimension. So for example, most social media profile pictures like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube have a square shape. And so a Facebook profile image, for example, displays on the screen of a desktop at 170 by 170 pixels square. But we don't want to create our image at 170 by 170 pixels, because if you look up here, that's 170 pixels right there. So that means our image would be this big. And if that gets blown up at all, or zoomed in on, or is displayed in our photo album, it's going to be a really bad picture. So we want more resolution than that, so it can be a bigger image but still be square. So let's just make ours a round number of 500 pixels by 500 pixels, and that will give us better resolution. First we go to our crop tool, and then up here is where we can put in specific dimensions. And we're going to use this drop down. We could use the ratio, but where we want to get specifically 500 pixels by 500 pixels, we're going to go to a different option, which is the width times height times resolution. And by the way, you could also just go right here and it will crop it automatically as a square. But in this case, we're able to determine the exact number of pixels in our width and height. Okay, so we go ahead and click that, and this actually already has some presets in here, and I'll clear it. And then we can just type in 500 space px for pixels, tab to the next one, 500 space px. And you notice now it's putting it into a square shape, and I'll hit enter. And now we can move this to fit it into our image. And we can just drag the fill handles, and notice how it constrains the proportions so it keeps the shape in a square. And if we want to do like we did before, where we expanded the sky and brought that in, we can do that. Maybe about right there. So we get the flow of this, but then we're going to add in some sky. And we'll keep it on Content Aware, so it's going to fill in this sky to the best of Photoshop's ability. And then we're going to click on the Confirm or Commit button. And you can see it now cropped it, and it just shrunk it down. It's displaying it at 16%. But if we want to see it at 100% of 500 pixels by 500 pixels, we can click on the Zoom tool. Remember, the hand tool will fill the entire screen or the entire window with the image. But if we click on the Zoom tool, this is one thing I haven't showed you yet, it will show it at its regular resolution. And of course, this is going to be different depending on the size of your monitor and so forth, but it gets pretty close. So now you can see we start at 0 pixels over here, and we go over here, and it ends at 500 pixels. See the ruler on the top? And by the way, if you don't have these rulers, let me show you where you can find those. You go to View, and it says Rulers right here. If I toggle this, see they disappear. And if I go back to View and click on Rulers, then it brings up the rulers. And if yours are not displaying in pixels, you could fix that as well by going to Edit, and down to preferences and units and rulers. And then you go to units. Under rulers, you can choose from pixels, inches, centimeters, etc. Make sure you clicked on pixels and click OK. And now you can see the dimensions of your image. And same thing over here. You notice where I hold the cursor, it has this little white line that lines up with the ruler. That's really handy. So you can actually, if I put it on the move tool, then I have an arrow. I can hold the arrow right on that edge. You see that that's at 0. And then as I go down here, if I hold the arrow on that bottom edge, you see it lines up with 500. Okay, so now we have a nice square profile picture that we could upload to Facebook or YouTube or any social media that takes a square format that's over, say, 170 or 180 pixels square. Okay, so just a quick recap of what we've learned in this lecture. We basically learned how to use the crop tool in several different ways. We learned how to select content aware, and we can expand our image. And then when we click confirm, content aware will do its best to fill in that space. We also learned that if it messes things up a little bit like it did with the trees in one of our previous examples, we can use the clone tool, or you could use the brush tool to fill in that area and fix it, as we did with the sky, and as we also did with some of the blemishes that occurred down in these flowers. And then we learned how to go up here and select the width times height resolution to type in a specific dimensions for your image. And in this case, we typed in 500 by 500 to give us a nice big image for a profile picture on social media. But if you were typing in a cover photo for Facebook, which is like the banner, then you could type in those specific dimensions that you get from Facebook, which at the time of this recording it displays at 820 pixels by 312 pixels. So then you would get a very horizontal banner-like image, but you just type that in here, 820 px. That's very important that you put the pixels in there, so Photoshop knows you want pixels and not something else like inches or centimeters. And then you type in the other number, which is 312 pixels, and then you hit enter, and then you can move this to fit it, and it will constrain those proportions. In other words, it'll keep the same shape on your crop tool, and you can just get it adjusted so it has all of the things you want but fits the proportions that the social media images need. So those are the basics on cropping your images and using the content aware feature.